From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Dylan the Tennessee Pal Fagan. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Thank you as always so much for tuning in, fellow conspiracy realists. This is our weekly listener mail program this evening. We're going to talk about some sheep. We're going to talk about something that stumped the Pentagon. We might get to some of the ongoing conspiracies about natural disasters, some alternate theories on pagers, a little fact we mentioned about the Postal Service. But before we get to any of that, we are going to hear from Max the Unblind. And before we get to Max the Unblind, we're going to have a quick word from our sponsors.
And we've returned, and yes, it is Max, the Unblind, who left us a voicemail, and we will hear from him right now.
Hello, Stuff They Don't Want You to Know crew. I would like you to call me Max, the Unblind, and I would absolutely love it if you use this on your show. I'd like to start off with business first. There's been a story that's been going around here in Kentucky about a sheriff that walked into a judge's chamber and murdered him in cold blood, apparently, in Letcher County, Kentucky. Now, the reason I'm calling you about this is because, as far as I can tell, no news outlet wants to talk about this. It's actually hard to find information about it. And with this hurricane, the election, stuff like that, I'm afraid it's going to get lost in all the news. And I'm glad that this happened, even though, I don't like it when people get murdered, because I've wanted to have an excuse to call you guys. And thank you. I went blind about 7 years ago. And one of the first things my family did for me was they bought me an Alexa device because you can use it with just your voice. And, first thing I did was I listened to music, to test it out. And as soon as my family left the hospital room I was in, I turned on your podcast. I've been listening to it ever since. Really appreciate you guys. And that's why my name is Max the Unblind, because I'm blind, but you guys help me see the truth of things. Anyway, would love it if you use it on this podcast. Very specifically, if you do use it on the podcast, please use this recording and not the other two recordings where I sound like an idiot. All right. Thank you.
I'm sure you don't, Max. I'm sure you don't.
No, he does not. But it is true. He left several messages, and I kept trying to figure out, okay, no, wait, this is the one. Oh, wait, no, this is the one. And that was the one. So thank you so much, Max, for calling in with those kind words. That means a ton to us. You have no idea. We hope you're doing okay. I got to spend a little bit of time with Max on the phone, you guys, and I don't want to go into his personal story about how he went blind, but it's one of those strange medical things where you go to the hospital because you're not feeling really well one day, your blood pressure is spiking, and then your vision starts getting weird. And then a couple more times it happens, and then eventually you go blind because stuff isn't functioning. Your blood pressure isn't working properly, something's going wrong inside, and then parts of your eye towards the back of your head there start to go bad, and then you lose your eyesight. It's really unfortunate, but Max is doing really great right now, and we couldn't be happier that we're a part of your world, dude.
Indeed.
So the reason why Max called in, right, he wanted a reason to call in, is about a Kentucky sheriff that allegedly killed a judge, like in the courthouse, in the chambers. And at the time when Max first called, this was just a local Kentucky story. It wasn't being reported anywhere outside of that area. Since that time, because you guys know that it's kind of a backlog on our end of voicemails, they're not coming in on a Tuesday and then we're getting them that day or even on the Thursday. Generally, it takes a little while to get through them. Well, it has become a huge story. Everybody, NPR, the New York Post, People, CBS News, CNN, everybody is talking about this. BBC is talking about this. It is a very strange story, and I figured we'd jump in to learn about it at least a little bit. So first, let's go to BBC, of all places, who wrote about it on September 19th, 2024. Title is, if you want to look it up, Kentucky Sheriff Held Over Fatal Shooting of Judge in Court. I'm going to read a bit of this written by Nadine Yusuf. District Judge Kevin Mullins died at the scene after being shot multiple times in the Letcher County Courthouse, according to Kentucky State Police. And a county sheriff named Sean Steins, who was 43 at the time, has been charged with 1 count of first-degree murder. And according to the best sources at the time, back in the middle of September, the shooting happened after some kind of argument inside the court. But at that time, when it was first being talked about like this, there was no motive. Nobody understood why it happened. There were so many questions. Why in the heck would one of the top members of law enforcement in the area walk into a judge's chambers and shoot that judge? So the speculation, as you can imagine, was pretty wild. It happened on a Thursday, and right after it happened, the sheriff who did the shooting, at least allegedly, was arrested on the scene. No problems, no incidents, no anything. He shot this person, at least according to witnesses and according to the official story, and then just said, okay, yeah, basically take me in. I don't know. Have you guys heard about this story at all?
Not a bit.
Yeah, I found it on a couple of forums, and I was reading into, as you said, first let me step back. Max the Unblind, thank you so much. It's a fantastic message, and please feel free always to reach out to us. When I first heard about this, it was on some forums, learning about Letcher County, which I had not heard of before this, the connections that seemed to proliferate as people learned more about the case. At first seemed, maybe people were reading tea leaves or seeing things that weren't there, but there's a lot of context to this that emerged earlier. Like I was not aware he was a bailiff before he was sheriff. So he was working for the court previously. And I guess he must have been a not unpopular sheriff because he was elected twice, right? He was re-elected in 2018, re-elected in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And I got that from the New York Times, from Emmett Lindler.
I just can't imagine what it would take for someone to walk into a situation like that so publicly, knowing they were going to do something that was going to end their life for all intents and purposes, walk out, surrender. This must have been intensely personal.
Well, this is where it gets really weird. This is coming from NPR, written on October 8th of this year. You can look it up. The title is Video Shows the Moment a Kentucky Judge Was Shot to Death. Listen to this, and this is weird. Police say Letcher County Sheriff Mickey Steins dialed his daughter's phone number from the judge's phone, then pulled his gun and shot Mullins repeatedly.
Sounds like there was a relationship going on, and he was being an angry father and calling him on it and saying, checking his phone. Do you know what I mean? Doesn't it sound like that?
But listen to this further. Kentucky State Police clarified that they have no evidence the daughter's phone number was on the judge's phone before the sheriff dialed it. So why would he do that?
Well, then maybe the idea was simply to obscure that it was him calling, but apparently he also told the employees of the court that he needed to talk to the judge privately. And then he surrendered himself, right? He said arrested without incident, but right after firing the shots, he walks outside and peaceably surrenders.
Yeah. And there's video of this entire thing happening. And people have watched it. People have watched the video because he was charged immediately afterwards with first-degree murder. And of course, the sheriff, gets arrested. He resigns as sheriff. He pleads not guilty to murder, even though there is video evidence of him doing it and so many witnesses. And it's just like, what?
And it wasn't his first time on the wrong side of a courtroom, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, tell us about that.
So this is from the Courier Journal. Back in 2022, there were allegations of some pretty nasty sexual abuse that one of Stein's deputies had pressured a woman into having sexual intercourse with him in return for some kind of favorable treatment. So it occurred through a proxy, at least the pressure on this victim.
Yeah.
Oh, and that article is by Andrew Wolfson. You can find it. Suit alleges Kentucky deputy forced woman to have sex in judge's chamber in lieu of fees. So instead of having to pay court fees.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit more from this NPR article because this is a twisted tale. Several days before Steins allegedly killed the judge, he was interviewed for hours in a deposition in a suit that names him, Steins, in his capacity as sheriff. The lawsuit claimed that Steins knew or should have known that a now former deputy had coerced a female drug defendant into having sex in exchange for freeing her from house arrest. So that's the specific there. The defendant said Deputy Ben Fields had forced her to have sex with him in Judge Mullen's chambers after hours, so like after the courthouse is in any kind of session, in exchange for Fields taking off her ankle monitor.
And the person filing the suit, the victim here, is a person named Sabrina Atkins.
Oh man, so I don't know. There's even more. I would point everybody. Was it the Courier Journal one, the Kentucky judge shooting? What was alleged about former Sheriff Sean Stein's motive?
There are a couple of things from that one is by Rachel Smith. There are a couple of other articles from Courier Journal.
Yeah.
And that the one that I was citing is from Andrew Wolfson.
Okay. Well, there's a ton you can learn about this now. And so if anybody who's interested in it, go out there, check it out. I did a quick little search just for the latest news about this case, and it looks like there's nothing brand new. Most of everything we've talked about is kind of the most up-to-date stuff. So do keep an eye on it. It seems like a weird case. It probably doesn't have a lot of bigger implications, but it is really weird.
You have to wonder what was said in that deposition, yeah?
Yeah. I just want to know. Apparently the sheriff and the judge had like lunch together right before the shooting occurred. They were just hanging out with other people having lunch. Some things were said, and then at some point it was decided I need to shoot this guy. Pretty crazy stuff. All right. Well, thank you so much, Max the Unblind. Anytime. Give us a holler. We can't wait to hear from you again. If you want to call in, call 1-833-STDWYTK. That's our phone number. It's a voicemail system. Call it. Tell us anything you'd like. For now, we're going to hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back with more messages from you.
And we have returned with more messages from you. Today, I brought two messages from you. Yes, you. One from T-Bone and one from Restricted Free Agent about two very different, but they, I don't know, they have some things in common, I guess, involving perhaps shipment and receiving of goods. That's about where the similarities end. So let's start with T-Bone with some alternate theories explaining the exploding pager slash two-way radio debacle that we've talked about recently. Hey guys, insert typical love the show comments here. Okay, we're doing that in our minds and in our hearts. Just finished listening to your discussion on the exploding pager and walkie-talkies, and I want to disagree with the point that you thought Israel pushed the button because they felt their long-term operation to insert the rigged devices had been compromised. I'd like to offer an alternative theory on the timeline of events, which I think is plausible and could be much more condensed. Step 1. Israel gets Hezbollah leadership thinking their cell phones are compromised, and maybe they are. Step 2. Israel learns of the orders for mass quantities of pagers and cell phones through the consulting group that we talked about. It's kind of the middleman in this deal.
BAC Consulting.
That's right. Step 3. During shipment of the devices, Israel intercepts them and plants the explosives. Step 4, shortly thereafter, the devices are distributed, and when Israel detects a reduction in cell phone traffic, they activate the pagers, then the WTs, a couple of days later. By modifying the devices during shipment rather than being the manufacturer, it's a shorter time frame from distribution to detonation. This could enable a quicker response, and I think would make the equipment more likely to actually be in the hands of Hezbollah operatives rather than potentially innocent victims. You can call me T-Bone. Feel free to read this on the air and let me know what you think. I will say, Ben, this certainly isn't far off from what we were talking about. I guess the main difference here is a slight tweak in the order of operations, and also the notion that perhaps we all, I think, brought this up at one point or another. Perhaps Israel felt that the jig was up and that they were about to be exposed, perhaps, and that they needed to kind of poop or get off the pot, because they would have lost all of the investment in this operation if it had been discovered and they, just tossed all of the phones. I do have a question for you, Ben, around T-Bone's point about detecting a reduction in cell phone traffic. Do you have a sense of what that means, or like how that might be a metric they would use in order to, kind of like align their timing?
Yeah, and it's a great point. T-Bone, thank you so much for writing in. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. If you ever want to drop us a line here, this is completely plausible because we know that a nation state with this level of intelligence would be able to monitor phones, I think, pretty easily as well, without having, obviously we're not in the meetings about monitoring the phones, but as a metric, combined with later public statements from Hezbollah, that we know that they were directing associates of the organization to avoid using those cell phones, even if they were, their purpose-made Hezbollah only cell phones. So you could see a measurable dip in there, and that might be a metric, as you said, Noel, that indicates the right time to strike. I think it just seems more plausible that there was definitely premeditation and waiting. There was definitely maybe a jig is up. I think it's more interesting, what you're bringing up, T-Bone, the idea of inserting the explosive apparatus at some point in the shipping process. You would just have to be really quick about it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And then wouldn't you have to also be able to seamlessly insert it such that it doesn't look as though the pager has been tampered with?
Exactly. You guys, I don't want to, T-Bone, thank you for this. I'm going to quickly reference another voicemail that Plebe, friend of the show, Plebe, sent in. Rather than an intercepting and, inserting the explosives, what if it was a swap? Like if you just imagine boxes of pagers and the intelligence is aware of which like pager models they are, they've already prefabricated the exact same type of pager just with the explosive in it. So when the call to have these shipped from the consultant, right, or to ordered via the consultant, they literally just switch boxes rather than having to open individual pagers.
That's a cool thought, please.
It is. And I guess, guys, as another of the added details here that maybe we didn't discuss was that not only are they distributing pagers, but also burner cell phones, and that they're in control of those as well, and that's what's allowing them to monitor the traffic, because that definitely was in the point here in step 2 that T-Bone outlined. Israel learns of the orders for mass quantities of pagers and cell phones through the consultant group. During shipment of the devices, Israel intercepts them and plants the explosives, but not in cell phones. There were no exploding cell phones, only exploding pagers.
You also wouldn't need physical access to those cell phones, if I'm understanding this correctly. You also wouldn't need physical access to those cell phones to monitor.
That's what I'm saying. They're in control. They just don't have to, to your point, Ben, they could monitor maybe even if they didn't know which phones they were. But I guess if they're going dark and going into kind of like operations mode, they wouldn't be using the phones as much. They'd be relying specifically on the pagers. And so that's why they're looking for the drop in cell phone use. And at that point, most likely the people that would be mobilized using the pagers would be members of Hezbollah.
And it may even be, this is purely conspiratorial speculation. It may even be the kind of thing where you drive people to those decisions, right? Like you let it be known that the cell phones are compromised, thus pushing people toward the pagers.
Yes.
And then they push toward the walkie-talkies, and you've got them there as well. These are possible. And I do believe that we will, T-Bone, learn more about the specifics of that operation later on in the future. We just don't know when. Probably not immediately, but in a few years, these kind of things usually the story gets told.
Guys, thinking about this story again and kind of trying to look at it from a different angle made me think of another story, or kind of perked my ears up when I heard a mention of this other story. The FBI actually basically started their own startup company that offered these cell phones that were very attractive to criminals because they offered this kind of like special encryption or whatever. And they marketed them, the FBI, to criminals, and then were able to use them when they were in the criminals' hands to execute a massive sting operation. So this kind of felt like a precedent almost that we didn't talk about. And I thought that's something that would be worth mentioning here.
Yeah, ANOM, ANOM. That's the FBI phone, right? I only know about this. There's a book called
Darkwire.
Darkwire. Yeah.
And it's coming out as a Netflix series, actually. That was the news that brought it up in the press recently.
I didn't know that, but I remember the book by a guy named Joseph Cox. It's a great read, but I'm so glad you brought that up, Noel, because look, these kind of operations don't go as planned all the time, right? Because they're often at the forefront of technology. If you want to learn more about ANOM, which you just mentioned there, Noel, check out Darkwire, the incredible true story of the largest sting operation ever. It also reminds me, too, of the Long Lines building and our long-standing fascination with that. You probably know about this already, T-Bone, but check out the Long Lines story if you haven't heard it before. It is the true story of why there is a ginormous windowless skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan.
Yeah, it's the place where the intelligence community literally splits all communications off so that there is the communications that occur and then the intelligence apparatus's feed of the exact same copied communications.
Yeah, but just absolutely. And I think it's still on the feed somewhere. Didn't we record a live episode about the Long Lines building years back? Yeah, so you can search that up. But I did just want to mention too, just in terms of the precedent of the ANOM story, the FBI got 12,000 units of this product into the hands of various criminals, from drug traffickers to members of organized crime and all of that stuff. So the novelty of the Israel version of this grift, I guess, is implanting explosives. But that could have just as easily been done in this situation, though maybe the net was a little wider. But in terms of like the types of folks that got it, they were mainly appealing to them as a business, and they were reaching out and buying them directly as opposed to intercepting them and, from a company that these individuals were already purchasing them from. But I do think there's some interesting parallels there.
Yeah, because, if you look at the ANOM operation from the FBI's perspective, like we said, they're after people who are engaged in things like drug trafficking, right? Which is not a capital punishment offense in the United States. So blowing up the cell phone and killing them is, circumvents the way rule of law is supposed to work in this country. But I think you're absolutely right. You're astute there that this is another precedent. I was focusing, I guess, I think like you, for me, it's the explosive aspect.
100%.
The lethality of it.
That's the new twist on this. Well, thank you, Tebow. And really quickly, guys, I know I'm running a little out of time, but I just thought this was worth reading. Got another one here coming from Restricted Free Agent. He asks us to use this moniker because of what he's talking about. He knows this organization could potentially come after him for what he's about to tell us. I love the show, says Restricted Free Agent. I've been catching up, so I'm sorry if you've already covered this. We haven't. I'm about 10 months back and listen to you guys or stuff you should know every day on the route to keep my sanity. I'm a letter carrier and have been for a little over a decade, and we're divided into city carriers and rural carriers, which is just a dumb fact for you. As a city carrier, we've been without a contract for almost a year and a half. They spent all of COVID telling us how important we were. We watched UPS get a huge pay raise as a reward for how they dealt with COVID, but our union and the post office have been yanking our chain while telling us how important we are to democracy for this election. It's pretty insulting, and even more so because we aren't allowed to strike due to federal law. It's called the Lloyd-La Follette Act. This was new to, I think, Ben, you and me, and I'm sure, Matt, that you might not be fully aware of this either, the Lloyd-La Follette Act. The last time the letter carriers did strike, the National Guard was called in and failed miserably to do our jobs. Again, the National Guard called in to replace the
not to
striking
break
workers.
the strike, just to be the
like
scabs.
the scabs, 100%.
Yeah.
The post office is filled with bloat and corruption, but the people delivering your mail don't have a contract and are the only ones out in the elements and will be blamed after this election, no matter what we do, by whoever loses. Also, politicians pay almost nothing for all that junk election mail you throw away every day. I sure do. Sometimes keep some of the really absurd ones as little historical keepsakes. We have carriers who are on government assistance, and I've never once heard about our lack of contract on the news because it's the definition of stuff they don't want you to know.
Boom.
Beautiful. Well done, restricted free agent. And we definitely want to get that out into the world because, as you said, Noel, I think we were startled to realize that there's not a legal ability to strike. It doesn't make sense because we associate unions so inextricably with that kind of exercise of worker power, and actually reached out to a buddy of ours who is a postal service worker in Colorado and wanted to talk to my local mail carrier about this, but he's busy, because when I see him, he's at work. So I'm going to try to catch him. I'm going to try to catch him when he goes by our local diner in the neighborhood here. But hopefully we can get some more firsthand evidence. But yeah, thank you so much, restricted free agent. It just doesn't, I understand it. I understand, the idea that the mail must always continue, but it feels like you could make a strong argument that need has been weaponized against the actual carriers.
Yeah, and we know that the U.S. Postal Service has been in a pretty tough spot in recent history.
Under attack, dude.
100%. And it just doesn't seem like this level of harsh kind of treatment would be conducive to retaining high-quality employees.
Or a sustainable organization. I mean, it almost, it feels like we can not associate it with the move to cripple and gut the USPS, which has been going on for decades, and further privatizing the mail, through UPS. Oh, that's very similar to PGL and PGA, through UPS and through FedEx and stuff like that. And we've got a lot of people working for those private organizations, and they have their own stuff they don't want you to know as well. And I'm sure you know that too, restricted free agent. But I agree, this is something people need to be talking about more often. Not to be too Joni Mitchell about it, but the U.S. Postal Service is something you might not miss till it's gone. You know what I mean? And there are people who want to cut those public services that you pay for as a person in the United States.
Yeah. I'm just as a person who experiences mail, the ye old snail mail, it is one of those things that feels like eventually we're probably going to move away from. And I don't know. It's simply because unless you're in a specific job or of a specific standing where you're constantly sending correspondence back and forth, or legal documentation or things like that, there's no reason for it. And generally you would use like a secured FedEx shipment or something for a legal document. So it is crazy to think about. And that's nothing against you, restricted free agent, or anybody who's working in that field. It just feels like something that humans are moving away from.
Well, and I can't imagine that restricted free agent is going to put up with this kind of crap for much longer before they start to look elsewhere, whether it be FedEx, UPS, or some other private organization for employment. So I think that's it for me, guys. Thanks to T-Bone and Restricted Free Agent for your messages. Let's take a word from our sponsor and come back with one more segment of Listener Mail.
And we have returned. This is the final act of our weekly listener mail segment. We are going to hear, we'll keep it really brief because there are two things we want to get to. We're going to save the Hurricane Helene and Milton conspiracy theories for a future episode. It's our update on natural disasters. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we had a lot of people writing in about the hybrid sheep story that we talked about briefly on our strange news segment. And you guys remember this story. This is about Arthur Schubarth, Jack to his friends, who illegally bred and sold these gigantic hybrid sheep clones to big game preserves. He recently got sentenced to 6 months in prison and 24 grand USD in fines. So Jasper and many other folks wrote in about this. Hello, folks, says Jasper. There are two main dangers that were probably considered in the indictment of the guy cloning sheep. One, these sheep were hybrids. He used tissue from a large wild sheep called the Marco Polo sheep and artificially inseminated female clones using semen collected from the testicles of a hunted bighorn sheep. If the resultant hybrids went on to breed with wild bighorn sheeps, whether by escaping their pens or if bighorn sheep pass through their pastures, that could mess up the genetic integrity of the species and introduce traits that might reduce the ability of bighorn sheep to survive in the Rocky Mountains. So I'm going to pause there because that's a pretty interesting argument, right? The creation of an invasive species or the eradication of a species because of invasive genetic traits.
Wow, invasive genetics. That's a concept.
That's a dangerous one, agreed. And the next point, which we were not aware of, Jasper tells us bighorn sheep are very susceptible to infections that don't cause serious diseases in other sheep. A major example, and thank you for the pronunciation note here, Jasper, is Mycoplasma oviaminae.
Domine Patri.
And also with you.
It sounds like a blessing from a priest.
So in domestic sheep, this causes mild or asymptomatic illness, but it will absolutely obliterate the bighorn sheep in an area if it's introduced. And Jasper is telling us this because Jasper is friends with some colleagues that research this specific infection in domestic sheep. So there are these incredibly robust, rigid regulations about what species of sheep or goat can be imported and from where, and how they can be kept to minimize the potential of cross contact with bighorn sheep. This is not a hypothetical risk. Jasper, you linked us to a great source from the Justice Department of the United States themselves. And I think when stuff gets to the DOJ, it means it's pretty serious because it reminds me, we talked a little bit about this. It reminds me of the restrictions that Hawaii has on the importation of food or animals, right? Or especially fruits. And I imagine invasive species that seem fun at first, like probably hamsters. Like you probably can't bring hamsters into Hawaii. They'll just overrun the place because then it would be hamster Hawaii. Moving on.
Oh man.
Yeah. So we had another person follow up with a more, I would say, character centric opinion on this guy, Arthur Schubarth. Agent Alkaline says, recently in our local news, this story has been blowing up. This guy, Arthur Schubarth, also owns a sketchy local pet store in Great Falls, Montana, that kept all the animals, including puppies and kittens, in aquariums. And at one point, monkeys. But that was before I lived there. How it stays open is anybody's guess. It's no surprise they showed absolutely no regard for endangered animals or animals at all. Thanks, guys. Huge fan. Keep it real. There's a lot more to sheep law than I ever considered.
It's a specialty of the law. It's like bird law.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the invasive species aspect of it didn't really occur to me right up front, but it makes sense when you do have like an economy that's like so dependent on that particular type of animal. And I did not realize that there were certain species that were more susceptible to these types of diseases that could result from this sort of, breeding.
Mm-hmm. And we know what a lot of us in the audience are thinking. Can I still use sheep law as part of my cover identity on an operation? The answer is probably not, because it turns out there are real sheep laws, and you have to know what they are if you're going to plausibly impersonate a sheep attorney, a bighorn lawyer.
Wow. Yeah.
There's a word for it somewhere. Yeah.
Dude, guys, I found a Facebook page titled Close Down Jack's Pet Center in Great Falls, Montana. And it has a bunch of information and photos of this guy's weird pet store that Alkaline mentioned.
It sounds like it's been a controversy for a while. Also, Alkaline, I didn't read this particular phrase you used, but you said hand monkeys were also kept in aquariums. I didn't know that hand monkeys are a thing. We found finger monkeys, the smallest pet monkey you can own. They're pygmy marmosets. They're just like 6 inches big, not counting the tail. So maybe that's what you're talking about. They've got these big mogwai vibes. They look like Pokemon. I kind of want to hang out with one.
Dude.
Or if we're the CIA, well, let's figure out how we can use them to spy.
Mm-hmm.
We have one more here. We'll get to letters from home next week, but we have one from some anonymous sources, some folks on Instagram as well, hipped us to this crazy story. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but not too long ago, mystery drones swarmed a U.S. military base for 17 days. And as of last week, the Pentagon still officially doesn't know what's happening. This was over Langley Air Force Base on Virginia's shoreline. Like, okay, for several nights, military personnel in this place that is home to a bunch of the U.S.'s most advanced fighter jets, including the F-22s, they had said somebody is breaching our airspace. This is airspace over Langley. This is one of the most tightly controlled airspaces in the country. And about 45 minutes to an hour after sunset, a bunch of drones would arrive in the sky. They were roughly 20 feet long, fly at more than 100 miles an hour at an altitude of 3,000 to 4,000 feet. And then other drones would come in one by one. I want to shout out to Gordon Lubold, Lara Seligman, and Aruna Viswanatha over at MSN for this article. You can find it there easily. The drones had a predictable path. They headed south across Chesapeake toward Norfolk. This means they went over the area that is the home base of SEAL Team 6 and the world's largest naval port, Naval Station Norfolk. Nobody knew who the drones were coming from. Was it possibly another agency, another department, and they just had, crossed wires of paperwork? Was it possible that they were a test from rival powers? I mean, look, a little quadcopter you could buy off Temu or Amazon is not going to be 100 miles an hour capable, and it's not going to be 20 feet long, right? Unless I'm looking at the wrong drones.
I don't think you are.
Nope.
Oh. Okay, I was hoping you guys were going to tell me, no, dude, you can totally get like 5 of those and you get a price break. This story is still developing. We haven't found an answer yet, but we know that there appears to be abnormal or unusual drone activity over U.S. government sites. This occurred in December of 2023. So just when, we just learned about it and it happened a while back. But 2 months before that, in October of 2023, 5 drones flew over a nuclear weapon experiment site in the U.S. and they never got caught. And this was in Vegas. And they don't know who operated the drones in Nevada. They don't know why they were there, what they were attempting to do. And a spokesperson for the facility, which is run by the Energy Department, said they've upgraded their system now to detect and counter drones, which means, cough, cough, shoot them down or disable them. I'm wondering how they do it too, because you guys remember you guys remember the training programs where people were teaching predatory birds to attack drones?
No,
Yeah.
That sounds terrifying, though. Are these like falconers? Like what? Well,
yeah, it's they're red-tailed hawks, and I think you were correct, Noel. I think there are falconers involved. The story came out like, oh my gosh, get this. 2014 was 10 years ago, guys. The story came out 10 years ago.
wow, old.
So I'm sure that program continues apace, but this is also telling us something big is afoot or in the sky, because
Did you just say Bigfoot in the sky?
A foot in the sky. It could be a big foot in the sky. Yes.
it's a Bigfoot swing as far as puns go.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. It reminds me too of the Chinese spy balloon that floated across the country
Yes, of course.
while we were recording.
How could we forget the Chinese spy balloon?
Right. Yes, we'll always have the Chinese spy balloon. And so these drones, over the course of more than 2 weeks, flying off, circling back, I'm wondering why they couldn't track them. Like why they couldn't find where they were landing, because they had to be landing somewhere nearby, right? They couldn't be just flying over the Atlantic every night shortly after dusk.
No, they'd have to have some sort of pit stop location.
So do you guys have any guesses before we wrap today?
Bro, your guess is as good as mine.
My guesses are all horrible and Dr. Seussian in level. My guess is maybe someone is like the best possible scenario is that someone is doing internal testing, what we would call pen testing, right? Penetration testing, the drone equivalent of white hat hacking. And I don't know. It's equally interesting to see how they were figuring out how they might try to catch these. One guy said, hey, why don't we get the U.S. Coast Guard to shoot nets at them? I'm sure somebody brought up the Falcon thing. And then someone else said, what if we use directed energy? And then someone in the FAA also probably responded on the email or in the meeting and said, yeah, the problem with directed energy is that, you might miss and hit an aircraft.
Yeah.
With people on it.
All right. Counter drone program. And these drones have tethered electromagnets attached to them. So they fly close to the other drones and then they zap them with the electromagnet and then bring the drones back.
Mm-hmm. There we go. I like that. I like the use of the magnets. I also, if we're talking about government largesse, why don't we just build a duplicate of all the stuff over there in Norfolk and Langley, right? And then now we just have two. I feel like I pay a lot of taxes. I feel like we could do that.
Just have two.
Just, ¿por qué no los dos?
Guys, I've always thinking we really need a second Pentagon just in case the first one gets compromised.
Yes. We'll call the first one Pentagon 1. It works in print. Never mind. But yeah, we'll have P and 2P or not 2P. That's the question. That's the question. Yeah. So there is an explanation. Spinning this story out a little bit. And please check out the articles because it's a fantastic explanation. After everybody was trying to figure out what happened, there was a rainy morning on January 6th. A guy named Fengyon Shi has parked a rented Tesla near Newport News, Virginia, about 11 miles from Langley. And he is a student at the University of Minnesota. And he was trying to fly a drone. He told people in the area that his drone got stuck in a tree and he tried to free it using his controller when a neighbor called the police. The police show up and they say, hey, man, this is terrible weather to fly a drone. And this is like the Black Mirror version of a cat stuck in a tree. So they tell him to call the fire department and they'll help him out. Instead, she returns his car, his Tesla. He takes an Amtrak to DC and then he flies to California. So this is, by the way, the behavior of someone who's been made and not a U of M student. And so the drone falls to the ground. The feds get it and they find that the drone has photographs, Navy vessels in dry dock, shots taken around midnight. And some shots were of vessels that were being constructed in the shipyard. They arrest him on January 18th, just a few days later, as he is about to hop a flight to China on a one-way ticket. And he said, look, no, I'm not doing anything crazy. I just like ships, you guys. I didn't know it was restricted airspace. I love boats are cool,
Dude, yeah, of course. And I was just heading back, I was just doing my thing here, doing my little hobby. And I was just going to head home.
And so, spoiler, they don't buy his story. They say that he is guilty of unlawfully and knowingly taking photos of classified naval installations. And this is the first case of a drone that came up under U.S. espionage law. He said he had been on vacation. He flew drones in the middle of the night for fun. The judge it ends up sentencing him to 6 months in prison. And Xi's attorney gets the award for the best quote in the case. Xiaoming Cheng says, if he was a foreign agent, he would be the worst spy ever known, like worse than James Bond. And that's where we're going to end the story. You can learn more, but let's end on this question. Guys, there was more than one drone. What happened to the other, college students?
Dun, dun, dun. Cliffhanger.
They investigated a haunted house together, and then, sorry.
It was old man Willikers from the haunted amusement park all along.
Yeah, and they've trained the Falcons to attack the people controlling the drones now, too.
Mm-hmm.
Death by Falcon. Big thanks to Jasper, DJ. Big thanks to Agent Alkaline, Maxi Unblind, T-Bone, Restricted Agent, everybody who wrote in.
Guys, really quickly as we wrap up, have you heard the theory that these Tesla robots are actually just being remote controlled by somebody?
Yes. And have you heard that the guy who did the design for, what film was
iRobot.
iRobot.
Yeah. Alex Proyas, who also directed The Crow and Dark City. The design
Dark
for
City's so good.
I love Dark City, and I love the original Crow. But the both the vehicles and the robots themselves appear to have been completely lifted from that film. Yeah, dude.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And we want to hear your ideas, your new leads. Join the cause, folks. Tell us the stuff they don't want you to know, and give us the ideas that you'd like us to use in future episodes. We try to be easy to find by any number of mediums. You can give us an email, you can give us a call. You can also right now find us online because you're probably listening on your phone.
By hook and or by crook, you can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook, where we have our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy. On YouTube, where we have video content galore for you to enjoy, as well as on X, FKA Twitter. If you'd like to find us on Instagram and TikTok, however, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show in those locations.
Our phone number, should you wish to call it, is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. If you've got more to say than could fit in a 3-minute voicemail, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities who read every single piece of correspondence we receive. An email is one of our favorite ways to get in touch with you. Send us the links, send us the video, send us the strange audio you can't explain. We want to hear it, see it, read it, experience it, take it to the edge of the rabbit hole. We will do the rest. Always suckers for a great pun. And we can't wait to read what you write. So join us out here in the dark. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.